Welcome to another edition of Critical Issues, Alternative Views. We're back from our summer vacation. We took a little bit of a summer hiatus here, but we're back and we're ready to roll. And with me, as usual, are Don Cooney. Don is a professor in the School of Social Work at Western Michigan University. He's also a Kalamazoo City Commissioner and running for re-election this fall, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that election a little bit later in the program. And also our other regular viewmeister, as we used to be called, Felix Brooks. And Felix is an adjunct professor at Western Michigan University, and also his main job is the Officer of Diversity and Inclusion at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. So, guys, we're back at it, and our topic today is basically elections. It seems a little weird to be talking about, now your election's coming right up.
Right.
In November, but the election that we're going to start off talking about isn't going to happen for over a year from now. I mean, a year from now, the campaign's really going to get into swing. But of course, in American politics today, elections stretch out over, what, 9 or 10 years, I think?
Yeah, right.
The new campaign starts at the end of the old campaign.
Exactly.
You know?
It really
Yeah.
seems like there's no stop. It just starts right up
Terrible.
again. So let's take a look, because most people know that things are underway, both in terms of the Republican field and the Democratic field. The Republican field's quite a bit larger than the Democratic field right now. So let's start with the Republicans. And of course, the big news all summer has been Donald Trump, the Donald, and who decided to throw his hat in the ring. Nobody took him seriously as a candidate to begin with. This is more self-promotion for a narcissist who is into reality TV and promoting himself, and everybody thought he would attract attention, but not much in the way of support. But a surprising thing has happened, and the Donald does seem to have a considerable amount of support. At the time of our taping, he's up at about 30% of the Republican field. So, Felix, what's your take on Donald Trump?
Well, it's been interesting because I think looking at the election this time around and looking at what happened last time with the Republican field, which also started out with a large field, people had thought that Donald Trump numbers would slowly drop in the polls, and that hasn't happened. In fact, it's just been just the opposite. He's persisted. And I think a lot of that has to do with his from-the-hip sort of style, his his willingness to take risks, to say outrageous things, and some of that is tapped into some of what people are characterizing as the anger in the American public. He's the person that people identify that anger with. He's the candidate they think that he speaks for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think also the outsider effect. People are very disappointed, disgusted with what's happening in Washington, and he is the anti-Washington person, and so is Ben Carson, that are out there. But the other thing, I think that he portrays this macho thing, this strength thing, and when people are hurting, they're looking to that to say, hey, yeah, look, we're tough, we're not going to be.
Oh, and we can be great again.
And we can be great again, yeah. And that's the image that he puts out there, and a lot of people latch on to that.
Because I think there's this romanticism about this America, this concept of America that existed only for a short time after World War II, where we were the undisputed leader.
Yeah, because all the other countries were
and the
destroyed.
geopolitics of what's going on in the world today, that's not the case.
Not at all.
I mean, we spend more militarily, but our interests have been pulled back greatly. We don't have the sort of influence in the world that we had 50 years ago or 70 years ago after World War II ended. But people, when he talks about getting back to greatness, I think that's the conception people have in their mind, that he can take us back to that.
Yeah. The other thing that scares me about Trump is the people around him, the people that are supporting him. And their xenophobia and their
racism.
Their reaction against anybody who's different than themselves. And when you look at it, it's all white. Everybody around him is white. And some of his remarks on immigration are just totally outrageous. And
well, he's going to round up all illegal immigrants, right?
Yeah, well, 11 million of them, 12.
kick them all out, right?
Right.
And it seems that the immigration issue was the first issue where Trump started to gain some traction,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, he made those
Yeah.
outrageous
Those
statements.
they must go comments.
The comments about Mexicans that were coming over were criminals, they were rapists, they were disease-ridden, and some people seemed to really respond to that, and that just seemed to help him get on a roll. And he's kept going.
Absolutely. And when the way he treated the reporter from Univision, Jorge Ramos, is that his name? Yeah. The way he treated him, the way he acted toward him, was just a reinforcement of this white supremacy. That's the way I saw it.
And he was an outsider.
Yeah. Right.
And you don't belong in this room.
Right.
You know, even though he may have been impertinent in some of his comments, the fact that he had him summarily tossed out of the room is, I can do this because of who you are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
There is a kind of bullying style,
very
obviously,
much so.
with Trump, and you know, he does. I mean, to me, he's scary in the sense that he's sort of a kind of right-wing demagogue who, you know, it's surprising to me that he is gaining the traction that he is, given the more or less overt racism of the part of his campaign. And
I can't help but thinking about Germany in the 1930s, when they were down and Hitler appeared on the scene and told them they're great and they're going to be great again, and he drew in more and more people. Nobody thought he was going anywhere either.
And at the same time, letting his followers know who the enemy is.
Yeah, right.
Who are the people that are among us that are a threat to us?
Yeah,
you know.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so certainly there's good reason for many Americans to be angry.
Yeah.
Right? There's good reason because of economic conditions and the amount of economic inequality that exists in our society. Yeah. So there's all kinds of reasons for people to be angry, but the danger with Trump is that he's not talking about any of the real issues. He's not talking about any of the real factors, the social conditions, the political and economic conditions that give rise to those economic inequalities and those things that are causing people to experience harm in their daily lives. So, and again, it's the classic, you know, hate those guys over there, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're the problem.
They're the problem over there. And so then, again, the structure and the elites and the interests that are behind the inequality are left off the hook.
Yeah.
Nobody pays any attention to them. And it's sort of a classic divide and conquer kind of effort. So in that sense, again, I hesitate always to draw comparisons to Nazi Germany, but I think you're absolutely right that if you've got a population that feels downtrodden and feels that they have been harmed and injured, their pride has been hurt, if somebody comes along and offers a way for them to feel good about themselves again and a place to direct their anger, then you can see a Trump rising in the polls the way
It's funny because during vacation I read this book by Greg Iles. It's called Natchez Burning, and Natchez Burning is a historical novel that goes back to the mid-1960s in Mississippi, all the way up to post Katrina. And what Iles does a great job of outlining for you who these folks are, who have generated all this anger. And at that time, when he was talking about, when the book starts in the 60s, it was mostly white males in the South who felt disaffected and felt alienated by the civil rights movement and the fact that African Americans were gaining more and more rights. And they were going to fight tooth and nail against that happening and impacting their lives until they were angry.
Yeah.
I think those are the same types of individuals that Trump seems to be able to appeal to.
That's what I think.
People who remember a time when America was great, but not very inclusive.
Right. That's right. Great for some.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they want that again. The other thing that really gets me about Trump is when he begins to talk about economics, his whole solution is the same solution that Reagan had and the Republicans had all the time. Take care of the people who got the money, they'll generate the jobs and we'll all do great. I mean, that's a model that has never worked and it's not working now, and he wants more of that, and that's really scary to me.
Supply side economic
Trickle
down theory. Of course, trickle down never does seem to trickle down.
Yeah.
The only people he seems to attack of the money class our hedge fund.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks that they should be taxed more.
Right.
But other than that, not much
No,
else.
No. And when you look at his, the New York Times did an analysis yesterday of his tax plan. And really, it's a shift in wealth from the public sector to the people at the top. And the idea, again, the same old thing we've been hearing, these guys will generate the jobs and we'll all do better. Where's that proof of that? Where's the example of that? It's not happening.
Yeah.
That's what got us into the mess we were in 2008.
Exactly.
By allowing the private
Exactly.
sector to, you know, to hold sway over the economy.
I'm really wary of any cuts in the public sector. I mean, that's the problem now. We can't fix our roads.
Yeah.
Schools are falling apart. More and more kids in classrooms in high school. I was talking to a high school teacher at Central today. He's got 35 kids in his class normally. And you got more and more kids in there. And there's less and less when the public good. It's all in the private.
I mean,
good.
think about it. We have our own legislature in the state of Michigan right now who can't come to any agreement on the roads. And part of the reason why the Democrats don't want to weigh in on this is because they're talking about raising $700,000, but they can't tell you where the money is going to come from.
Yeah.
We're going to cut it out of the budget, but they won't say where.
Where are they going to cut?
Yeah, where are they going to cut this money from?
Yeah.
One of the things about Trump that has amazed me is that he's picked a couple of fights along the way. And at both times, I thought that those fights had the potential to blow up in his face, but they only seemed to strengthen his appeal. So one fight was during the debate when the Fox News person, Megyn Kelly, you know, tried to get him to talk about his obviously sexist remarks that he has made on numerous occasions. And so he came back at her strong, and so he got into this little tiff with Fox News for a while.
Yeah.
And I thought that might harm him, but it didn't seem to. And then, of course, he also made some comments about Senator John McCain.
Yeah.
And again, in a sense, derogatory comments about his war hero status, his prisoner. You know, well, he got caught, right? And implying that.
I like people that don't get in prison, that don't become captives.
Yeah. So what's your take on that? I mean, it seems like he had a chance there to alienate some segments of the right, but seemed to only get stronger out of it.
So the question is it that they're more enamored with him or not so much in love with the other candidates?
Yeah.
I mean, because you had folks that they've trumped up, no pun intended, Scott Walker, Marco Rubio, and now those guys are all in single digits in the polls.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to be the next man up, even Bush for that matter.
And Scott Walker's getting huge amounts of money too, but he's not going anywhere.
It's not generating any traction at all.
Mostly Koch brothers money.
Is it mostly Koch
Yes,
brothers?
it is.
Ah.
Yeah, there was an article on the satirical website The Onion the other day that the Koch brothers are dissatisfied with Walker and they're going to put him up for sale. And that's about the truth anymore. One of the things I thought was very interesting about that Republican debate that was held, which Fox News orchestrated, right, was that Trump seemed to come right out and admit that in our political system, we have legalized bribery.
Yeah,
We
he
have
did say that.
legalized bribery.
Yeah,
He basically said, look, I give money to candidates, and I give money to lots of different candidates, and I expect that if I have something that I need them to do for me, I will go to them, and they will do what I asked them to do because I gave them money. He just was right out. I mean,
exactly.
if we ever would have had a moment, it seems, where we could talk about this whole issue of money in politics and the fact that it is a form of bribery, it would have been then, but somehow the moment passed. Nobody seemed to
They didn't follow up
on that.
It just seems like people know this.
Yeah.
And so what? Okay, that's just a given. We know that that's true.
Yeah.
But nobody's been as blatant as he was in saying
Yeah.
that. And he says, that's why I don't ask these people for money, because then they'll call me and expect me to do something for them. No. I mean, he really laid it out. That's exactly what's wrong with all this stuff.
So maybe the media and the public are so cynical about the role of money in politics that they just passed it right over.
Yeah.
I think so.
I would
think so.
agree.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the thing with Megyn Kelly, that again appealed to the macho, and
To
a
the
bully.
angry white
Yeah.
male.
Angry white male.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put these women in their place. Yeah, right.
How dare her ask him a question about something that he actually did say? Not that she made anything up. These are quotes these are things that he actually said, and he turned it and the media looked at it and said, "Well, she asked him hard questions." Like, no, she didn't.
No.
She asked him about something that he said, which is what she's supposed to do.
Right.
It's supposed to be a debate,
Yeah,
right?
it's supposed to be a debate.
Right.
She's supposed to be a journalist
Yeah.
of sorts, right? Even though she works for Fox News. I don't know if that qualifies you as a journalist or not, but given the propaganda that network usually puts out, but she's supposedly a journalist.
Well, with McCain, though, his cohorts stood up for him
Yeah.
real fast.
Yeah.
But the public, nah, he's an
Yeah.
insider too.
Yeah.
We don't want to deal with him. He's insider.
Yeah.
So McCain's a double loser, right? He lost an election
Yeah.
to Obama, and he got caught in Vietnam,
Yeah,
and so he's a
what's
double
the matter
loser in
with
there.
him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
I think the question comes: do we really want to elect an outsider?
Wow.
Is that what we're talking about here? Is that why he's staying so salient in the polls right now? Is there a sentiment that says we want somebody who knows nothing at all about Washington, how Washington works, and is not beholden to anybody to become president? Because that's also a dangerous precedent too.
It certainly is. What qualifications does Ben Carson have to be president?
None.
Good surgeon.
Besides the age, and he meets the citizenship requirements. but there's a whole governing thing. At some point after an election, you have to be able to govern.
Yeah.
It's not an amateur hour. You
No
can't shoot from the
experience.
hip.
International stuff. International.
We
things.
talked a
You gotta
little bit
make
about
decisions.
that before we came on air about the interview that Trump had with a conservative radio show host, where he didn't know who some of the key players were in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Had no
Right.
clue.
And he got hostile when he was
Yeah.
pressed on it. And this was by a right-wing
Yeah.
reporter, right? It wasn't that he was being attacked by
No, not at all.
a member of the mainstream or lamestream media. It was basically somebody who should have been a supporter, but just asked him to clarify some of the issues concerning the Middle East, and he didn't know some of the basic things you
No.
should know if you're a presidential candidate. And then he got real hostile and snippy because he was being pressed on it. Well, by the time I'm in office, I'll get caught up on that. I'll find that stuff out.
And I'll
So-
get good people around
Yeah.
me. See, it's
Yeah.
another one he always says.
So do you want to bring a bull into the china shop?
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the
you could
questions.
do a lot
that
of
we-
harm.
Yeah.
Oof.
Well, what about Ben Carson, though? I mean, here's an interesting case because, okay, you've got Trump over here, narcissist, demagogic, a blowhard, calling attention to himself all the time. Carson's style is completely different.
Yeah.
Mild-mannered, seems like a sweet man, totally different presentation of self, African-American. And yet he says outrageous things also. I mean, his views are probably almost as extreme as Trump's.
If not
Yeah.
more extreme in some cases.
In certain areas.
And there he is. So the only commonality, it seems to me, is the fact that they have extremist views. Is that why they're both doing well in the polls? Because it would seem if the styles are so different.
And they're not from the establishment either.
Yeah, that to me, that's
I think
a key.
Don and I talked about that. That may be the common denominator. Both of those two guys are true outsiders. They're not involved in politics at all in terms of having held elective office, as compared to all the rest of the candidates in the field, with the exception of Carly Fiorina.
Yeah.
Everybody else has held elective office.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you're looking for an outsider, then these two guys fit the bill.
They fit the bill. And the other thing about Carson, I think, is unlike Trump, his conservative credentials are so clear. I mean, he's really conservative. Whereas Trump, I mean, he was talking a while ago about single-payer health care and saying that was a good idea, about being pro-choice in some way. Carson's real clear right down. So the people that are very, very conservative say not only is he an outsider, he's standing for the stuff we believe in.
Yeah.
So do you think that Carson's drawing a bit more on the evangelical right?
I would think
I
so.
think so,
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
I think
he's
so.
had a steady stream of books that have sold well, I think, among those groups. And so, because it seems hard for me to see that Trump's going to be the prime candidate that's going to attract that group.
I don't see that
I
either.
don't
Given
see it
his
either.
own personal history and his personal style. And you're right, he has been sort of all over the map in terms of some of his positions. So,
Yeah,
he's
I
not a
don't-
big tent sort of guy, which which makes you wonder, even if he wins the nomination, can he carry a national election? And my conclusion would be no. I don't see how it could happen.
No, I don't
We've
think so.
alienated too many of the these populations around the country who are going to play a significant role
Yeah.
in this next
Right.
election, and you're not going to get any of those votes. Very
I don't
little, if
think
any.
so, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the Democrats would like to see him win. I mean, I think they'd like to run against
Yeah.
him.
So I have a couple of questions here. One is, does Trump really have a chance to win the Republican nomination? And what's wrong with Jeb Bush and Walker and Rubio? I mean, why are these guys who were touted as the smart guys, well, Bush, the smart Bush, right,
Yeah.
in comparison to his brother, Rubio, the young rising star, Walker, the rock star governor of Wisconsin, who put the unions in their place and is
Still is trying.
cutting the guts out of the University of Wisconsin.
Yep.
So what's wrong with these guys? Why are they stumbling around so
I think it
badly?
comes back to what Don says. That what they all seem to have in common is they're all part of the establishment.
Yeah.
And that's where Trump and Carson, when they've had attacks against those folks, that's what they've said. These guys are all insiders.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go to Washington. Nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
They're backroom deal makers. This is what they'll do. So it'll be more the same.
I totally agree with that. And I think the other thing is that Jeb Bush has really dispelled the idea that he's very smart. I mean, he's
Yeah.
been making outrageous statements. Like, for example, would you repeat what your brother did in Iraq? And he said, yeah. If you knew now, would you do it again? And he said, yeah. And then 2 days later, he has to back off that. And he said something the other day about immigration, and he said, oh, I'm talking about Asians. Well, the Asian
Anchor
community-
babies.
Anchor babies, yeah.
So he was talking about Asians in general, yeah.
Yeah, so then the Asian community said, whoa, what are you talking about, right? I mean, he's made about 3 or 4 just crazy statements that make no sense, and then he has to cover it up.
Yep.
So people are saying, this is the
And
smart
he
brother.
doesn't have the Trump charisma either.
No.
To be able to
no,
get away with that
no.
stuff, you know.
I thought it was a really good tactic that Trump used, playing Bush's mother's recording, saying that he shouldn't run. We have had enough.
Yeah, we've had enough.
Had
Bushes.
enough Bushes in the White House, huh?
Plus, I think I see in him a profound disappointment because he thought that he was going to be the front runner, clear front runner
That's
by
right.
now, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
And so some of the things that they said lately, I think, come out of desperation.
I agree with you.
Almost that he was going to be anointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That it was his
He was our
birthright.
guy. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to a comparison between himself and Donald Trump, who he's been much more critical of in the last several days and the last several speeches that he's made.
Yeah.
Before he was above that. He wouldn't even bring that up, but now it's different, which lets me know that there's a sense of desperation there. Your poll numbers are under 10%, so
Unbelievable. Who would have ever thought that? Jeez.
especially with all the money that he has in the ground game that he has going for him, which I think in the end he still counts on is going to be a winning formula for him. But I think there's got to be some doubt there now.
I think so.
So
I
what's
think
going to
so.
happen? How's this going to play out? Because right now it seems very murky to me. Trump has sustained his momentum here. Does he really have a chance to continue to do well in the primaries?
I think that debate, the next debate in California, is going to be a bellwether. If he stays where he is in the polls after that debate, then yeah, he's going to be in it for the duration.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty good analysis, I think. I've always thought along the lines that he's going to self-destruct and he'll start falling. I'm not seeing that happening now. I always thought Scott Walker was going to be the anointed guy. I mean, even though Jeb was put out there, but Walker's standing for what these guys really believe in, and he stood for it real strong, and he stood up really strong against unions, against working people, against healthcare and everything else. I thought he's the guy that they would eventually go to, and I'm not sure that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know who the strongest candidate that the Republicans could put up is?
Who?
I think it's John Kasich, the governor of Ohio.
Kasich seemed most reasonable of them.
Well, I think he's the most reasonable. I think he did well in the debate.
Yep.
Yeah.
He seemed willing to take some positions that were a little contrary
He's more of a pragmatist.
to the right wing.
Yeah, yeah.
And the critical thing is that whoever wins Ohio wins the election.
Wow.
I mean, it really almost comes down to it that way anymore in terms of the electoral politics. The New York Times Magazine had you saw it, I think you sent it to me.
Yeah.
They had a cover story last week, and it showed the electoral process. And the first, like it was a game thing, step one, the primary. Step two, win Ohio. Step three, win the election. Now, that's oversimplifying it, obviously, because there are a couple of other states that are in that realm.
Yeah. Pennsylvania, being one.
North Carolina,
Yeah.
Florida. But again, if you win Ohio, you have an excellent chance of becoming the next president of the United States.
Wow.
So the initial scenario, I think, for a lot of Republicans was that, okay, Jeb is going to obviously be the candidate, right? Bush 3. And so, and then we assure his election by getting Kasich as the VP, right? So now, if Bush is the nominee, that guarantees Florida. If Kasich is the VP, that guarantees Ohio in their thinking. And voila, we've got the election. That was, I think, the thinking of some of the Republican insiders. But of course, Trump has screwed it all up for them.
Yeah, really.
And of course, Jeb's stumbling around has hurt them. But I think also then, if we're looking for a situation where, okay, Trump remains strong, Bush and Walker continue to stumble around, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, who would the Republicans turn to out of that kind of a scenario? As
could be.
Kasich seems to me to be a reasonable compromise solution.
Could make for quite a raucous convention.
It could be. Maybe we'll have one of those old-fashioned conventions where it's being fought out.
Undecided when
4 or 5 different ballots before you decide who's going to be on the ticket. Yeah.
And I could really see that happening. I mean, that's sort of been almost totally eliminated from American politics in recent years. Somebody emerges out of the primary system, and it might still happen this year, of course. But I think if there ever was a chance for there to be a contended convention, this might be. Next year might be the year. We got to think that it's still a year away, right?
Well, what was his percentage that he won in the last election? He won heavily, didn't he?
Yeah, he won. Well, the Democratic candidate in Ohio was completely self-destructed. And so Kasich he won in a landslide. But he was a former congressman also.
He's well known in Ohio too. So.
He's well known in Washington also. And he's got, I think, good relations among the congressional Republicans and the National Party. So I can see him being a candidate that could come out of the pack and make some noise.
And it's interesting because the chairman of the Republican National Committee got Trump to agree to sign the pledge that whoever became the candidate he would support.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't run a third-party candidacy. And I was really surprised by that.
Because that was the other wild card here, right?
Yeah.
If Trump doesn't get the nomination, then he goes rogue and runs as an independent, third-party candidate, and then
then we've got Ross Perot all over again.
Exactly.
In that case, he almost guarantees the election to probably Hillary.
And
we'll talk about the Dems in a minute.
The RNC knew that. They knew that was their biggest fear.
Now, Trump said he signed the agreement, he took the pledge, but he seems to me to be the kind of guy that would back out of it.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he would say, "Oh, that was then. It's changed now.
You guys treated me badly. You did me wrong. That agreement is no longer in force."
Especially if it comes out of a contested convention.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
if he comes out as the aggrieved loser, I see him still taking that route.
Yeah.
I think that that paper that he signed yesterday, that agreement, is flimsy.
One of the things that bothers me is when we watch the Republican debate, they don't deal with the real issues that the country's facing, and that really drives me crazy.
And that was part of the commentary, and I'm sure you heard this morning on NPR. Their whole appeal is to anger. It's not about issues anymore.
That's right. Exactly. It's fear and anger. And who's talking about what's happening with the economy to the ordinary people outside of the old idea of trickle down? They're not really coming to grips with that. What are they talking about the racial situation? They're not coming to grips with that. What are they talking about? The immigration things that they've put out there are so ridiculous that they don't make any sense. I don't think any thinking person would say these are adequate answers to that. And then what about the militarization thing? It's just more militarization. They're not coming to grips with the issues that the country faces, and that's really disturbing to me.
It's more about destroying the public sector, lowering taxes on the wealthy, continuing to beef up the Pentagon, give lip service to American exceptionalism, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And where's global warming?
Yeah.
What's climate change?
Climate change is, well, then none of them believe in it, right?
None of them
believe in it. Or they all take the route out of it. Well, I'm not a scientist. Well,
we have scientists that will help you.
There are lots of scientists that can fill you in on that. So, all right, well, what about the Democrats? So, for the longest time, it was Hillary, right? Hillary and Hillary alone. And, again, I was really, really dreading the notion that it was going to be a Clinton-Bush election.
Oh, boy.
And I still have a lot of doubts about Hillary, but Hillary was obviously the one and only on the Republican or on the Democratic side. Now, Bernie Sanders has come along and is running a very spirited and strong campaign. He's doing well in the polls. He was within, 7 points?
7 points
Clinton?
ahead.
Yeah.
In Iowa, not a place where Democratic socialists usually do well. He was also in New Hampshire.
Was ahead, wasn't he?
He's ahead in the polls there, yeah.
More likely to be expected because he's a New Englander himself. But so right now he's running a very spirited campaign. Now he doesn't get any media attention, or very little for the most part.
Yeah.
The mainstream media sort of ignores him and downplays his campaign. But he draws huge crowds wherever he goes, and he's starting to track in the polls. So what do you think about, let's open it up for both your views on Hillary Clinton and her candidacy, and then also the threat that Bernie poses to her.
Well, again, like Jeb Bush, she has been the anointed front runner. And she's been out there alone for so long, sometimes what that leads to is complacency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's got the ground game, she's got the money, but I don't think her skills have been sharpened on a lot of these issues. And then she's had a couple bumps in the road, like this whole thing about email, which I think is not that big of a deal at all. So much ado about nothing. But in terms of her handling it, the public has seen some stumbles there.
Yeah.
She hasn't done a really good job of articulating what went on there and why it happened. Same thing is true about Benghazi. Again, much ado about nothing, but when it comes to her articulating what happened there, hasn't done really well. And when you're on a national stage, you have to be coherent in how you articulate what your vision is for the country, or some of the things that you've had issues with. She's not been very good at that.
No, she hasn't been very good at that. I think there's a couple other things going on. I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. But I think there's a couple other things. I think there's been a reconsideration of Bill Clinton's campaign, to Bill Clinton's presidency. I mean, he gave us NAFTA, the withdrawal of Glass-Steagall, the reform of the welfare in the country, and several other things that, the increased sentencing project.
So you think Bill Clinton was the best Republican president we've had in the last 30 years?
I think that people are starting to say, wait a minute, yeah, maybe that guy wasn't so good. And I do think, we talk about American exceptionalism, the Clinton exceptionalism. I think people see these guys saying, both she and her husband, that, those rules don't really apply to us. We're a little different.
Yeah.
And then that they've accumulated all this wealth. How'd they get all that? And she goes out and gives these talks to Wall Street for $200,000 and stuff. People are starting to say, whoa. And who her money is coming, so much of her money is coming from Wall Street, and they've been so tied into that. I think that there is a reaction against all that. You talk about establishment. She's establishment.
So the things that work for her are also some of the things that have worked against her during this campaign and caused there to be some doubts. And I think that also there is, and you said it earlier, Don, they're still having to attract white male voters.
Yes.
who come from a paternalistic standpoint and look at any way they can possibly can to eliminate a female from consideration in the top spot. So that element's there too.
Very much so. Very much so. And Bernie Sanders, I think, has really plugged into a lot of issues that people really care about. It's interesting, about 3 weeks ago or a month ago, I don't know, he did a national streaming day where he streamed into a lot of different cities around the country. I don't remember how many, a lot. And they did, I think, 4 events here in Kalamazoo, and they were all filled up. I went to one at the Carpenters Union, and what struck me there was that the people that were in the room were people that have not been very much involved in politics, only a few of them. But a number of people said, I don't usually get into this stuff, but I like what he's saying. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing. He's appealing to people who generally aren't much into that, because he's hitting on issues that really affect them, like healthcare, like the jobs thing, like the inequality. I think he's tapped into some stuff that Americans really care about.
Yeah, I think that's been the issue here, is that Bernie is staking out an ideological position on the left as a progressive. He's not afraid to call himself a democratic socialist. He's not afraid to speak out about economic inequality. He's not afraid to criticize corporations. He's not afraid to condemn the influence of wealth and corporate money in the electoral process. So he staked out strong positions on the left. And I've long thought that if more candidates did that, they would do better electorally. You tried to do that in your own.
Be what you are, and that's what he's done.
Yeah.
But I do think that that's one way to run, and so Sanders has done that, and so he has cut into to Hillary Clinton's poll numbers, and of course she's had the stumbles as well. So the combination of those two things, because Hillary has always, I mean, we certainly need to recognize the historic nature of Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
If Barack Obama is the first African American president, Hillary Clinton has a chance to be the first woman president of the United States. This would be a huge, historic, momentous event for our country to have a woman as president.
Yes.
And Hillary Clinton certainly has the traditional kinds of qualifications to be president, with her long experiences in the Senate as Secretary of State and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that Hillary's burdened by Bill to some extent, and the legacy of Bill Clinton's presidency, and then she's also had this tendency to kind of track to the back away from the progressive positions that she's often staked out, particularly when she was younger, and has moved back to the center, sometimes even crossing over to the right.
Very much.
So she does stake out, I mean, on women's issues, she's excellent, and she's done a tremendous job internationally raising women's issues. So she certainly needs to be given credit for that. And in Clinton's first term, remember, she was the one that took the lead on trying to get the health care issue. Got burned really badly on that, and then tracked back, and didn't complain too much about when Bill Clinton, ended the welfare or signed the NAFTA agreement.
Right.
And so she's always sort of, whenever she gets too far to the left, the area where Bernie Sanders is willing to go, she tends to get some pushback, and then she tracks back to the center or to the center right. And so I think to some extent that hurts her also among some of the constituencies on the left, some of the more traditional Democratic constituencies. So anyway, that's I think one of her problems there.
I think, go ahead, you were going to say something. Another important thing, I think, is their ties to Wall Street. I mean, when Clinton was president, who did he bring in to be his economic advisors? And I think people have had enough of that, and that's troubling to me. It really is. Yeah, so the other thing is, I think people really like Bernie's authenticity. He's been consistent. This is what he's been saying for 35 years. He's not just saying something that he's going to switch to tomorrow. No, he's been there. I also like the way he responded to the Black Lives Matter thing. I think he responded to that very well.
He got some criticism. He responded in a very forthright way to that criticism, and took into account some of those criticisms.
Yeah. I think he hasn't said anything at all about foreign policy, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's where he's vulnerable among some progressives is his foreign policy issues.
Yeah, yeah.
But then again, Hillary Clinton's foreign policy is also going to be, basically an imperialist policy. I mean, there's sort of bipartisan consensus in American politics,
right.
both Republicans and Democrats, on an active interventionist kind of imperialist foreign policy, and bowing down before this notion of American exceptionalism. I think Bernie would be willing to depart from that to some extent, but he's also got some other issues there that I think might hinder him. And for Hillary Clinton, again, she supported the Iraq War resolution.
Yep.
Later backed off and criticized the war, but was willing to be pulled in as a senator to go along with that at the time that it happened. So I think that raises questions for people on the left about Hillary Clinton's candidacy as well.
And her uncritical support of Israel. Totally support Israel. Whatever they want to do, that's the best. Yeah, I think that's a real problem. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think that Bernie has really pulled her to the left. I mean, she's speaking on issues now that she wouldn't have been speaking on before.
She didn't have to when she was out there in the field by herself. You
Right.
You could leave those things alone until much further down the road, you know?
Yeah. And then it'll be interesting to see how Bernie does, see how he gets going. I'm putting a sign up.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what happens after they have the first debate.
Yes,
Yeah.
that'll be really good.
Because that'll be his real coming out party,
Yeah.
when they're on the same stage together.
Do we have that scheduled yet? I don't know. Is there one scheduled?
I don't know if there's
I
one
haven't
scheduled
heard
yet or
that
not, but I know
before.
they've been talking about it, so.
I think that'd be good. I know that he and O'Malley were last week when the Democrats had their national convention. They both were complaining that they were trying to that the National Committee was trying to set it up for Hillary, that they weren't allowing enough debates, and they felt that there should be a lot more, and they were strong on that point. So we'll see.
Well, like I said, when you're the underdog, you always want more debate.
Of course,
Right.
of course.
Right.
6, 7, give me as many debates as I can get.
I know.
And there's still one other wild card out there on the Democratic side, and that's Vice President Joe Biden. Now, Felix and I both heard him on NPR this morning in a speech in Atlanta last night, and I think we both came away with the same impression that he's not going to
He's not
get
going
in.
to run.
He's certainly thought about it. He's being encouraged by a number of people, especially since Hillary has had a couple slip-ups, and people don't take Sanders seriously. So I think there are some parts of the Democratic Party that are pushing Biden to get in.
Yeah.
But what I took away listening to that this morning is that because of the death of his son recently, and this is what he said directly, that I don't know if I have the emotional energy to pour into a campaign, and if I don't have that, I'm not going to do it. And so my impression was that Biden's toying with it, but will not jump in.
And I would agree with that.
I think that could change if Hillary slips more. I think the mainstream Democratic Party does not want to see Bernie Sanders as the candidate.
No, I would agree with that.
And if they think that Hillary is slipping and Bernie's going, and that there is a danger that Bernie could get it, I'll bet you he would jump in.
And Biden, if he does get in, he's got his own baggage too, though.
He does.
Some of the controversial stance that he's taken, especially going all the way back to the Anita Hill hearing. So he's got a lot of baggage that would come out during an election campaign, and he'd have to reconcile that.
And he's got some ties to Wall Street and credit card groups and stuff like that that are troubling.
But isn't it interesting that we've sketched out a scenario for both parties where we could go into next summer with things not quite settled,
Yes.
with leading contenders in both parties who have so many negatives that other people in the party feel necessary to push forward a middle ground candidate.
Yeah.
Kasich, as I nominated on the Republican side, and Biden would be that person on the Democratic side. So it could be one of the most interesting political years coming up if things continue to be unsettled the way they are right now.
It was a fantasy of every one of my political science professors when I was an undergrad and in graduate school to go into a contested convention.
Wow.
I mean, they just marvel at the idea that we could actually get to that convention and not know
Wow.
who's going to be the nominee, that it would have to go through all those machinations like it did in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So the whole
Holy
smoke-filled
cow.
room kind of
Wow.
thing. So
Oh my gosh, that would be something. We haven't had any of that. No,
Yeah.
that would be great.
So who's going to win the 2016 election in a year and what, 3 months?
yeah, don't hold me to that.
Oh my gosh.
Who's going to be the next president of the United States among the people that we've talked about today?
Are we talking about our hearts or our head? What are we talking about
Yeah.
here?
Well, I think we all know where we'd like to
Yeah,
see
right,
things go,
exactly.
but let's be hard-headed analysts here and pundits and try to figure out what might happen here. What do you think?
I'm not going out on a limb. I'm going to say when the dust is all clear, I think Hillary Clinton will be president when it's all said and done.
I think that that's most likely, but I haven't given up on Bernie. I think that he's touched into something that's very deep in the American people, and I think there could be something happen here.
Yeah, I guess if you pushed me, I would end up saying that Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States also. I think that her starting position was so strong. She had so much money and support, although, you know, clearly there'll be a lot more money on the Republican side once things clear. You know, you've got the Koch brothers out there, and you've got other big corporate donations. I mean, we still have to take into account Citizens United, right?
Yeah.
Citizens United and the role of dark money still may play a decisive role in this campaign because there's going to be unlimited corporate funds that can be poured into a Republican campaign. But I think Hillary Clinton nullifies some of that, pulls in some of that money.
Yeah.
And often the corporations want to play both sides against the middle, right? They want
Because they want to be with a winner.
to
Yeah,
be
they
with the
wanna be
winner
with
no
the winner.
matter what.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I still think Hillary may end up being in the strongest position at the end, particularly if there's a lot of bloodletting on the Republican side, and it doesn't seem to me like a clear consensus candidate's going to emerge anytime soon.
And
on the
they've
Republican
done
side.
so much to alienate constituencies that they're going to need to carry a national election.
The Hispanic vote.
Yeah,
they've
Hispanic
lost-
vote,
completely
African American
lost
vote.
that. Yeah.
They've lost any traction that they thought they would gain with those groups. That's gone, depending on who they nominate. So you figure the last election that Obama won, 5 million votes that he beat Romney by. That's a huge amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the turnout for midterm elections, as we've seen, has been favorable to Republicans, but that very same formula does not seem to hold in national elections.
right. It
When the
doesn't.
turnout for minorities is going to be much higher, much more at stake.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely correct. And yeah. Yeah. I don't think a Republican can win.
And I think, as Don said, particularly with the Hispanic vote, that's a key constituency.
Really?
And
Yeah.
and they've done nothing. They've gone out of their way to alienate that group.
Yeah.
And if Hillary's the nominee, that probably ensures a huge vote for women
Yeah.
for the Democratic candidate. So again, if you think about the younger voters, the millennials, they tend to track a bit more toward a progressive position. And again, if the women get really actively involved in a Hillary Clinton campaign,
They
the
will.
Latino
They will.
vote. So yeah, I mean, I think electorally things set up pretty well for a Hillary Clinton presidency at that point. And then it comes down to, if you don't have this Bush-Kasich combination that I talked about earlier, you've got Florida and Ohio back in play.
Yeah.
And again, if Hillary wins one, or, seems to me if Hillary Clinton would win either Florida or Ohio, probably then she's going to win the election.
Yeah.
But how about a Kasich-Rubio?
Well, a Kasich-Rubio is another, for Republicans that would be an attractive, but which one wants to take the play second fiddle, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
And Rubio has his own issues because what position is he going to take on immigration throughout the campaign? Because that's going to be a question that would be asked of him
Yeah.
as a vice president.
Yes.
And he'd have to be front and center about what his position would be.
He tried to stake out a middle
Yeah.
position, but that's not going to work.
No.
No.
It's not going. What might work for him in the primaries was definitely not going to work for him in the national election.
No.
And he's tried to parse that, and it hasn't even worked for him well so far in the primaries. It may get him on the ticket with somebody, though.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not quite.
And the other thing that the Democratic Party has to do is to be very, very strong on the voter suppression efforts to beat
That's
them
right.
back.
That's
Because
right.
let's be very open and honest about this. The Republican Party has done everything that it can
Yeah.
to suppress African American voters.
Exactly.
And they're going to do that again. And they're using every dirty trick in the book to try to suppress the African American vote. And they see their only hope of winning a national election is to suppress that vote. And they haven't been very smart about the Latino vote. So I think they're certainly going to lose there. They would lose the women vote. I think they would lose the young people vote. They've got those angry white males who are going to
they're
vote
gonna
for
be with
them
them
no matter what.
They're there.
But so I think we really need the Democratic Party really needs to keep its eye on and be very stalwart in knocking down or working on those voter suppression efforts. So.
You know what, I really would, my greatest hope would be that the presidential debates would lead to a national discussion on some of the issues that are really important.
Tax
Immigration,
foreign policy,
economic
change.
inequities,
Climate change.
climate change. And I think Bernie could do that. I think Bernie being in there could really move it. If he's not in there, take him out of the equation.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to talk about anything important.
No.
Right. Then you got people tracking to the center and
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Don, we just have about 5 minutes left or so here, but we do have another election, a local election.
We
It's
have a
gonna
local election
come up real
coming up.
soon.
We will elect we will hopefully elect the same mayor, but there will be a mayoral election.
Which is different this time, right? We're
Right.
separating out the
mayor
mayor's position
runs
from the other
separately.
city commission
Used to be that
positions.
whoever got the most votes among the commissioner candidates would be the mayor. This year, the mayor is a separate election. Bobby Hopewell is running, and I think he's done a tremendous job, and I really would like to see him get reelected. For the commission itself, it's interesting. We got about 14 candidates.
For how many seats?
6.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the issues is we want to make sure that we have some women up there, because we only have one woman on the city commission now, and she's not going to run again. Thankfully, we have 2 excellent candidates for women, Sharon Sykes and Shannon Sykes and Erin Knotts.
Yeah, I know Aaron real well. So.
Yeah, both of them are excellent candidates, and they've jumped into the thing, and they
And they don't come in as novices either.
no,
So.
they have a lot of experience. They're young, and they're activists, and they could really have a very positive influence on the election.
And we need to contribute. That's an overall, this whole diversity piece is important with respect to the commission. And so I'm glad you raised that issue, because we do need some of those diverse opinions and diverse views.
That's exactly right. And they've been out there, they know the issues, and they're ready to get involved in them and go for it. So I think it's really important. And then we're working on some very important issues here. You mentioned before, Felix, the whole economic situation in the city. I mean, last year we had a $2.9 million deficit, and in order to reach our budget, we gave early retirement to 221 people. We can't do that again. No. So now, here we are with another $2.9 million deficit this year, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to make this. What are we going to do? We can't keep cutting people and provide the services that people deserve in the city. When I first started on the commission, we had 916 full-time workers. Now we have 632. And we can't, I was talking to the guy yesterday, Todd Pryor, who's the city forester. And his staff has been cut by a quarter. And he's expected to do the same kind of work.
Exactly.
He can't do that. We need to get some more resources into the city. We're working hard on this poverty reduction issue, which is enormously important in this city, because the poverty rate among our children has doubled in the last 10 years.
And infant mortality rate is extremely high, too.
Mortality rate is extremely high. So we're working on that, and we've got some ideas on that, on employment, on youth support, and on family support. And we've got to continue that. So it's really important who's sitting up there to make the decisions about where we're going to go in those things.
It's a critical year.
It is a critical year.
You had your campaign kickoff last night, and both Shannon and Aaron were there, and I was extremely impressed with both of them.
Good.
They are both very articulate, and they both clearly have knowledge about the critical issues facing the city. They both have tremendous experience. And so, yeah, I just think they're extremely attractive candidates for City Commission. So we hope that they'll be joining you up there pretty soon. So there's also the other issue from the Walker Institute on criminal. We just have 3 minutes left. So
Okay.
can you just briefly,
Yeah,
maybe what we need to do is to come back and have another show which we devote
Okay.
to the city
Yeah.
issues in the city election. But just in the last 2 minutes that we
basically,
have.
and Felix has been somewhat involved in this. We're working a lot with ex-offenders, and I know you've been working an awful lot with ex-offenders. The number of ex-offenders coming back to the city, do you have any statistic on that? It's hard to get a
It's hard to
statistic.
get I've never seen the numbers, but I think that the folks who work for what's that guy's name?
Michigan Works.
Michigan Works.
They don't have it either. No. But anyhow, the statistics we're getting are enormous. We're getting like over 500 people a month coming back to the city from prison. And we don't have anything in place to deal with them.
To help those guys help those guys and women make the transition.
Yeah, Michigan Works deals with 20% of that. That's all they can deal with. So there's 80% of those guys out there. So we've been working very hard on employment, connecting these guys with housing. Marcus
Education.
and Restore has done a tremendous job. Momentum has been doing a tremendous job getting these guys into the workforce. But we need what we're really looking at as a one-stop shop, where people coming out could go to one place. We could hook them up with the social services that they need. We could hook them up with getting them towards employment, the health care that they need. I'm going to have 4 of my students, 2 of them ex-offenders, who will be working with these groups in the city this time. And we've got a long way to go here, but we're going to really work on that.
And we definitely need better alignment. Because, you're dealing with issues that, guys coming out who are on probation and parole have infinitely more resources than guys who come out who are maxed out.
Yeah.
Who get nothing.
They get nothing.
But they come back to the community anyway.
Right.
Well, I know we did a show on this last year, so maybe we need to revisit this now that some things are happening there.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
A lot going on all over the place. So we're glad to be back with you, back on the air with some new issues of critical issues, alternative views. The political seasons that are coming up are going to be very, very interesting. And there are a lot of other issues that we want to be coming back and focusing on this fall and on into the rest of the political year. So we thank you for joining us and invite you to come back and visit us again on Critical Issues, Alternative Views.